This is Kitten Features, and you're listening to ShowX Live with Ken in the student accommodation all the way in Scotland. Wait, that was years ago. You're listening to ShowX Live with your favorite Scotsman Ken, currently residing in the US of A, and Wayne, mostly from Colorado.
Hey, wait a second. I'm on the show too, and I don't get any billing at all? Well, I know how to solve this.
I do.
Soldater, Fremad, March! You're listening to Show X with our favorite Scotsman Ken, our child of the corn Wayne, currently living in Colorado, and Todd, who now has an army of angry Norwegians at his back. Enjoy the show!
Alrighty then. Hey everybody, and welcome to ShowX today on, let's see, it's what, January 10th, 2021. Already, it's 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. GMT on this Sunday, everybody. Welcome to the show. We are going to have some fun talking today about some recent stories that have come up around some of our
drama.
Favorite media. Yep. Some things going on with the Disneyverse and all things related to Star Wars. We have some discussions and things that have come up recently that I was unaware of really until it was brought to my attention and was kind of like, what is going on? And
yeah, I read into this a little bit, and I don't really fully understand it all, so I'm kind of relying on you guys to explain it to me as we go, because I all the names that people are saying, so and so did this, and then they said that, and I'm like, I don't know who these people are.
which is absolutely fair. But yes, so we're going to get into it on this one. In fact, the first article, it was one of the ones we shared in our chat getting ready for this, to kind of bring it up. I think I absolutely allow you to kind of help bring us to what is going on, and posting in, at least I'm going to post to the chat the Forbes link, the article in Forbes about this. That's fine. Because there have been a few different perspectives that I have seen come forward about what's going on in the Disneyverse right now and the Star Wars.
Let's do it this way. You can put the link to the Forbes article so everybody's got context, because I want to reference that eventually.
Yeah.
But I want to start what touched this all off, and what even got me looking at, I didn't even know that the goings on that we're going to be talking about this week were going on until the event that touched this whole thing off sort of in the first place, to where I don't know what you would call this, the enthusiast media surrounding feature films. So like Variety, Hollywood Insider, etc., have now picked up on this event that I'm going to tell you about in just a second, which got me doing research into what is going on behind the scenes. And important context for this episode, a lot of what we're going to be talking about comes from YouTube channels like Mike Zero and Overlord DVD and Geeks and Gamers and a Star Wars Theory. And a lot of it is unsubstantiated and a lot of it is unattributed. So I want to make sure that we somewhat separate fact from rumor, and then we can talk about what the implications of all these things are and sort of prognosticate as we go on in the show, and of course deal in the chat as well. So I will pop a link to an article from Variety. So as most of you know, in Season 2, Episode 8 of The Mandalorian, at the end of the episode, the good guys are trapped on the bridge of an Imperial light cruiser, and the Dark Troopers are pounding their way in. They have the good guys under siege, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, an X-Wing, a lone X-Wing shows up.
So spoiler for those, as we talked about before, about the Mandalorian. So
yes,
no, it's just
seen the end of,
we are going to be talking. It's going to be relevant to this conversation. So if you are someone who is looking to still watch, listen to, or see what's going on with Mandalorian season 2 and the finale, the last bits of it, this will touch on it. We've given the moratorium long enough that.
Am I supposed to leave my own show?
Well, Ken, we keep giving you a chance to catch up and watch this.
Well, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, Ken. You were on the show when we talked about what happened.
Yeah.
Oh, so, I was okay. I don't mind. I won't remember anyway. Star Wars is mostly prairie lights to me anyway. I don't know.
Right. So, you're one of the people who's in that sort of middle ground, which is was kind of weird to me. But we'll talk about that too. Because actually, you're a really good sort of test case, right? Because I have a bias, and I think Wayne has a bias.
I absolutely have my thoughts.
A second group of people that has the opposite bias of us, and I think you're in the middle, where you don't have a bias one way or the other. We'll talk about all of this in the episode too. Anyway, getting back to it, Good Guys Under Siege, lone X-Wing lands, and the way they shot it is so good.
They allowed it to take its time to build and for people to have enough information to wonder without knowing for sure. Yes. And I do agree it was kind of masterful in the reveal. Yep. The pacing of it.
So, long story short, a certain Jedi Master shows up, and a certain Jedi Master shows up in CGI de-aged form. And so a YouTube channel by the name of Star Wars Theory was doing a live react of the episode, and like I did, and like a ton of people who are fans of Star Wars did, broke down in tears.
Can confirm from the people I was watching with live at the time.
As this was going on. And so one of the members of the Lucasfilm story group, having been shown a screenshot of Star Wars Theory crying at the treatment of Luke Skywalker in a way that doesn't suck, made fun of him by posting, "We're not supposed to share our feelings." That was the tweet. That is an exact quote from an official member of the Lucasfilm story group.
That sounds a lot like okay, no, this is going to be putting my feminist hat on here as well, I guess, or even my men's rights hat, I guess, actually. That's kind of belittling to men in general, that kind of comment, especially for somebody in a position of authority. I don't think it's a nice thing to say to anybody. You shouldn't share your feelings, regardless of context.
Yep. I honestly, I think the Variety has the exact tweet. Emotions are not to be shared.
Like, maybe if it's a reference to Jedis, I could get that, right? I mean, if he's saying like Jedis shouldn't have such emotions or something, that'd kind of be in the context of the lore and stuff, and that would. But it doesn't seem like it is to me. That seems like it's just a contextless tweet.
Yep. So that got me thinking, and I started looking things up. And started watching videos and reading different articles and watching different videos about stuff. And apparently, and again, now we're transitioning from what is known to what is unknown. Apparently, behind the scenes at Lucasfilm, there's a splitting or a factionalizing of the higher ups, or the what you want to call it, the leadership.
Yeah, the people that are in charge of making decisions about both from Disney and LucasArts, or Lucasfilms, essentially.
So the one faction is Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, and George Lucas. And the other faction is Kathleen Kennedy, Pablo Hidalgo, and others. But those are the two names that keep getting brought up in common with all the stuff that I've been looking at. Favreau and Filoni and Lucas obviously are very, very interested in maintaining George Lucas's vision for the Star Wars universe, including the saga, including sort of the extended universe, and we'll get into some of those, some rumors and speculation about that too. The Kathleen Kennedy, Pablo Hidalgo faction is very much interested in minimizing the Skywalker, the saga, essentially, or the Chosen One prophecy and the Skywalker saga, and are very much invested in moving on to other things.
Okay.
So, there's a lot of data out there that says that the Kennedy Hidalgo faction has not been successful. Toy sales are way down. Chinese box office cratered after The Force Awakens. Like it's a decaying exponential into the amount of box office in China that these films have gotten. Not that necessarily matters, just a data point that I found. Visitation to the Star Wars land in both Florida and California was not what was expected, and that the increase in sales in 2019 was due to increased ticket, food, and souvenir prices rather than increased park attendance. Okay. Yep. So attendance was down throughout 2019, right? Which is pre-pandemic. Like, if it was 2020 attendance, you would expect it to go down.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so the important caveat that this is pre-pandemic attendance. So all the data suggests that the Kennedy Hidalgo view of the Star Wars universe is not a viewpoint that is primed for success. On the other hand, The Mandalorian has been a complete success, so much so that Season 2, Episode 8, which is where this event touched off, was so popular that it crashed the Disney Plus servers.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Well, as well as a data point is that The Mandalorian has now surpassed another threshold, which is the most pirated series ever over Game of Thrones.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it took the crown. So the most recent season is now is the most pirated show out there, which is another data point about just saying they got something. Important. It means people really like something about that show.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Exactly. So, okay. To go beyond, again, all of this is speculation and rumor. Supposedly the top brass of Disney have taken Kathleen Kennedy off of everything at Lucasfilm, with the exception of the Acolyte, the Star Wars Acolyte show, which is supposed to have Brie Larson in it.
Okay.
And what, from, again, more speculation, this is supposed to be set in the Old Republic era, and supposedly, and again, can't stress this enough, total speculation, Kennedy and Hidalgo are so bitter that The Mandalorian is doing well that they are going to try and retcon the Chosen One prophecy in the Acolyte show.
Eek.
If that's true, that's pretty petty, and all it does is harm the franchise as a whole. But how certain are we of that being true?
Again, this is all speculation.
This is all speculation. None of these videos, like the only commonality amongst the videos is that they say the same things, but none of it has a source per se. Like it's all people that I know at Disney.
Right.
Right. And so like a channel like Overlord DVD doesn't even use his real face. He's behind an avatar. Right. And it's just like people that I know that work at Lucasfilm or people that I know that work at Disney are telling me these things. Right. And so all of this should be taken with a reasonably sized grain of salt.
A mountain of, yeah.
Considering what the principals tried to do to our childhood over the last 5 years, I don't put it past them. Right? Meanwhile, the Dave Filoni, the Filoni, Favreau, and Lucas faction are supposedly trying to put together Snyder Cut for episodes 8 and 9.
Like, okay.
Do you know what the Snyder Cut is, Ken?
No.
Okay. So supposedly there's this director's cut of Justice League that is supposed to be way better than the version that went into theaters. And
What's
I guess
the difference?
I don't know. There's just more of.
All right.
There's a set of more and different stuff than what was put into the cut that went into theaters. I don't exactly know what's in it. There are a whole bunch of people online that are really mad that the final version is supposedly not what Snyder's vision was for Justice League. In any event, supposedly there's a cut of episode 8 and episode 9 that are along the lines of the Snyder cut that are J.J. Abrams / I guess Rian Johnson's vision for those two films. That, I mean, they both clock in at about 2.5 hours. So, like, some amount of stuff got cut. I know there were reshoots, at least for episode 8, if not episode 9 as well. So I don't know how that all factors into it. And so supposedly Favreau, Filoni, and Lucas are working on the Snyder cut, if you want, or the Lucas cut, or however you want to describe this, of episode 8 and 9. Moreover, supposedly plans are already in place to use Rogue Squadron, Ahsoka, and maybe Andor, but I'm not sure, to fix any retconning that might happen in Acolyte.
Oh, interesting. Like preemptively, they're already preparing.
So they're yeah. I don't know what that means. So it sounds really weird. It sounds impossibly unprofessional.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? That's which leads me to believe it's not exactly accurate.
I think a lot of people. Okay, when there's a potential lie, you need to think about who benefits from this. And in this case, I would say the person who is potentially lying or exaggerating or whatever is the guy who's making the YouTube video, who is, making all the money from ad revenue on that video, right? The more controversy that is stirred, the more people will click, the more money is brought in, right? And I don't think there's any proof that Disney's doing this.
No.
I think they would probably, if the upper, management was aware of this kind of thing, they would quash it, right? They're not interested in that. It doesn't help anybody. So I think it's a capitalist system. There's money to be made here. There's a chance something here will disrupt that. I think we can all rest easy in thinking that the capitalist system will remove obstacles that potentially reduce revenue, right? If it's real time.
Okay, you say that, but right, what was the narrative coming out of The Last Jedi? Like all of the people that said, this Luke Skywalker is a weak and feeble old man and not the most powerful Jedi ever, not the Jedi that defeated, one of the most powerful Sith Lords ever in single combat, and then managed to redeem him while defeating the most powerful Sith Lord, at least that we've seen in the saga. Criticized the characterization of Luke. I have criticized the fact that there were no Sith Lords in this trilogy until the opening crawl of Episode 9, because Ben Solo's too weak, and Snoke didn't exhibit any of the attributes that a Sith Lord would have, except for the scarred face. Right? He didn't have the yellow eyes. He didn't refer to himself by the title of Darth. He barely used his force powers to hurt people, right? And again, just to give you my context before I launch into this, what is probably going to turn into a rant. According to the universe, when Darth Vader became Darth Vader, within hours of him getting the moniker, he was slaughtering children.
Yeah.
Right? That's what it means to be a Sith. Ben Solo couldn't even kill his own mother. Right? And had a whale of a time killing his father.
I think it's arguable about which is harder. I mean, that's very subjective morality. I think some people would have more. I think there are generals out there who have pressed the button to kill thousands of civilians. They would never harm a friend or a family member, right? I mean, I think it is subjective.
Okay, I'll buy that, but at the same time, like, there's something that happens when you take on the title.
Sure, of course,
of Sith Apprentice or Sith Lord. Like, something in you happens where you would do things that I don't even think Anakin Skywalker would have killed children necessarily, right? I mean, he kills the Sand People, but the Sand People killed his mom.
Yeah.
That's
indulging his emotions, yeah.
Wait. Anakin killed kids?
That's the Sand People kids.
No, he went into the Jedi Academy and slaughtered all the younglings.
He was Darth Vader at that point.
Was he actually Vader at that point? Had he been labeled Vader?
Yeah.
I didn't think he got Vader.
He was given the title of Darth.
Oh, before he did that.
Makes him a Sith apprentice.
Okay.
And then he was sent to the Jedi Temple to kill the kids.
Okay. Admittedly, it is. I have not really paid attention to the prequels as closely because I've mostly been like, meh. So that's why I was asking, because it's like I was trying to remember that timeline. Okay.
Yeah. Get your hands on the Darth Plagueis audiobook. You'll thank me.
Gotcha.
I do love the Darth Plagueis speech.
That whole book is just gold. Anyway, it's also the source of my assertion that had the prequels been told from the perspective of the Sith rather than the Jedi, they're way different movies.
Oh, interesting.
Because the Jedi spend their entire time in all three of those movies reacting instead of acting. And the Sith are the ones doing all the acting. So every time you see the Jedi do something in those movies, it's in response to something. And we never see the thing that happens that causes them to respond in the way that they do. Not really.
Okay.
So anyway. Yeah.
So we're talking about essentially what the kind of changing or the feeling of what had been going on, where it feels like may have come from Kennedy
and the media narrative.
Yeah, like an idea of what they were doing, what may be behind this potential rift.
So the media narrative coming out of The Last Jedi was of Disney apologism. and that, you know, the reason why people, you know, rejected The Last Jedi as a film is because the Star Wars fan base is toxic, and the fans are a problem. And did you see what they did to Kelly Marie Tran and Daisy Ridley? And it couldn't possibly be that, you know, every group has bad elements in them, and it's impossible to sift out the bad actors until they act badly. No, it's that the Star Wars fan base is toxic, and those people need to not be paid any attention to. And then when Solo bombed, it was more apologism. Like, they invented the concept of brand fatigue specifically to run cover for the fact that Solo wasn't performing.
I think there is something. I think brand fatigue does exist to an extent. I've heard friends talk about that with Avengers. Like, I'm so sick of the cinema being full of those films. Like, I've heard people say that.
So are those?
I don't agree in this context, though. I think Star Wars has been so disparately separate from its history of films that the new stuff still feels new to me in a way, and I imagine it should feel new to most people.
Yeah, so I don't know if I buy the brand fatigue argument, considering that Marvel MCU films number 21 and 22 were the best of them all.
Mm.
And I don't know how you do that with the concept of diminishing marginal utility or brand fatigue for the franchise. Like, if you compare the first Iron Man to Endgame, like, Iron Man is a fine film in its own right? But like, they're just getting their, you know, the MCU people are just getting their feet underneath them, whereas Infinity War and Endgame are like, you know, I compared Infinity War to Empire in terms of quality, and I think The Empire Strikes Back is the best movie ever made, even now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Avengers series is I'm sorry, people are going to hate me for this most likely, but I think it's one of the best film series of all time.
Yeah.
And I think the numbers also show that, though I don't think they always correlate, but I think in this case they do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but so that's kind of the argument against the idea of brand fatigue, is that for the people, because I also run into this, I am personally, I know, looking forward to more Star Wars universe titles and things, more Marvel universe things, and I think the only thing that comes close, and it's kind of where it's interesting that Babs is bringing up saying brand fatigue up until Baby Yoda. I disagree, actually, because for me, it was never that I was tired of more superhero Marvel movies, that I was tired of more Star Wars IP. It was a concern that I was going to get shovelware versus quality things I enjoy, right? Because every time I got a good movie, I loved it. Every time I got a movie that had challenges or whatever reason didn't speak to me, I didn't like that specific movie. And then if I started seeing a trend of 3 or 4 or whatever movies in a row that seemed to all not resonate with me, it wasn't that I was fatigued with brand, it was that I didn't feel like I enjoyed the movies being made by a certain brand or IP, and therefore might not enjoy more. And so it was more that I just kind of gravitated away from the ones I didn't like. Because, like, for me, you know, controversial or not, I was not a huge fan of the Captain Marvel movie in the overall Marvel universe of some of the various Marvel movies for various reasons. And
I haven't watched it yet.
And that's fine, right? There were things I liked about it, but as a whole, it was one of my less entertaining ones. And it was a lot of it because for me, it felt retcon of to other things. Because that's something I'm not a big fan of in anything I enjoy, is that maybe I'm just too old school, things like that. I don't like when known aspects of a storyline, an IP canon, things like that, get retconned. I tend to hate that.
Yeah.
It's one thing if you provide information that better refines the understanding of certain things and knowledge, but you basically say all this stuff we showed you doesn't really count. My response is going to be negative.
I think a lot of the retcon that we think about are ones that where we've been hurt by in the past. But let's just think about, for example, Jar Jar Binks. I'm glad that he is not ever mentioned. Well, obviously, he can't be in 4, 5, 6 because he didn't exist at that point, as far as I'm aware. But in the rest of the more recent films, he's never referenced again, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with his race, himself, and everything else just being left in the distance past forever.
They were celebrating on Naboo. The Gungans were celebrating on Naboo.
At the celebrate in the background. That's
effectively
a retcon.
Okay,
right? I mean,
but what was the real problem with the? What was the real problem with that retcon, right? The real problem with that retcon is they supplemented random cheering across the universe simultaneously without the ability for anyone to know what had happened from the classic Nub Nub song that was amazing and gave you some additional ways of enjoying what was the Ewoks in a much more intimate, localized expression of joy, because these were the people who actually fought the battle, and they were having this nice tribal celebration of winning afterwards that was quiet, reflective, and wonderful at the end of Jedi, to this random fireworks explosion around the universe that just did not resonate. Like,
Show X exclusive. Wayne is pissed off they got rid of the Nub Nub song.
I am, and I will say it over and over again. I love the Nub Nub song. I do. Nub Nub. It's a nub nub. Dun, 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 dun. I love that song. Are you kidding? It was such a great way to kind of bring things together in a little bit of celebration at the end of the movie that felt genuine.
Now,
that's how I feel.
To be fair to Wayne's point, it is kind of BS that the Death Star exploded and 3 hours later statues of Palpatine are being pulled down on Coruscant, right? Which was the implication of that montage at the end of the Return of the Jedi. So, and not only that, and like they violated that in the opening crawl of Episode 7, like the From the Ashes of the Empire. Well, wait a second, like the Empire was totally done as soon as Palpatine is dead, right?
Yeah, that's what you showed us at the end of these. Now you've retconned it.
That's what we saw at the end of Episode 6, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. But anyway,
so
Sir Pencer. Sir Pencer, Show X exclusive. Sir Pencer also mad they got rid of the Nub Nub song.
Hey,
I know. I, on the other hand, really don't. You can crush the Nub Nub song with an ATST for all I care.
I feel bad. Mika really says she doesn't remember. Mika doesn't remember the Nub Nub song. She must have only seen the extended versions and such.
Wow.
That is my THX remastered on VHS, always documented, unmolested one that I have. But regardless, going back to like that idea of retconning, right? When you introduce IP and thoughts and things that actually change the story and lore that has been consumed for so long, and I think it's an even bigger challenge with something like Star Wars, where the Star Wars universe grew beyond the movies in the form of books that at the time, and this is the big thing Disney's been dealing with, right? Up until Disney got it and changed everything and said that what was canon is no longer. There was this whole 20 plus years of people saying every book that came out, every game that came out was blessed by Lucas himself as being canon. And so you had 20 plus years beyond the cinematic movies of people saying, yep, this book series that I absolutely loved is canon. I can agree that this is not fanfic. It's not something that somebody just said, oh, wouldn't it be cool if George Lucas said, yep, we now have these other aliens. We now have Luke trying to build this academy up from the ashes and doing these things. We now have this love story, these kids, these things. And so people had 20 years of loving the universe beyond the movies to then have movies introduced and an idea that said, nah, we're just going to toss that to remake something.
I agree with you in theory, but again, that sometimes there's bad canon that needs to be removed, right? Or brushed over. That does happen sometimes.
Okay, again, but I would be curious for someone to show me where in the Star Wars universe that exists. I have not consumed any that I was like, this is bad. I've had someone who's like, oh, I would have rather, but that was actually bad.
Scientific explanation of the Force.
Actually,
you want to retcon out midichlorians?
Yeah.
Well, like, I argue midichlorians.
Again, is it? Like,
well, I argue midichlorians. Well, again, prequels was a retcon in itself, and should never have been done. Okay. So that's the thing. I think most of what the prequels did was garbage. And
agreed. But you still retcon a retcon, though, right?
Well, but that's what I'm saying.
And that is still a form of retconning.
You can retcon a retcon. To your point, Wayne, I think a lot of the EU stuff after the Disney takeover is worse than the stuff that came before.
Oh yeah, I agree. But that's the thing. But that's because they already. But that's because they already did the big cut of saying we're not going to reference all this beautiful writing from professional authors for the last however long.
Here's a perfect example: Princess Leia's bloodline. Right? They deal with it in the Legends EU. They dealt with it in the way that Leia runs across this race of creatures that knows her as Lady Vader.
Interesting.
Because she's the daughter of Sith Lord Darth Vader.
Gotcha. Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
That's how they refer to her. Like, that's how they know her. She's a legend to them, or a myth to them, as as the daughter of Darth Vader.
Okay.
In let's see, the book is called Bloodlines, I think, and Bail Organa supposedly knew about the fact that Leia was the son of Anakin, or the daughter of Anakin Skywalker, and hid that from her, and then it got out. Somehow the message got to somebody who was against Leia in a specific type of Senate debate.
Oh, ooh.
And it got exposed. And it's just like, is that the biggest wet fart in the history of the universe for something that important?
Okay.
Right? It's just like, so the Galactic Senate is split along federalist states' rights lines, right? To put this into like a political framework. They were like the federalists and the populists, or the something like that, and Leia was the head of one of the factions, and one of the leaders of the other faction came into possession of the message from Bail Organa to Leia Organa to say, hey, by the way, you're the daughter of Anakin Skywalker. I'm really sorry about that. Sucks to be you. And it was just like, man, it's missed potential.
You think they would do more with that? Yeah.
Here's this awesome thing, right? And you could do the Nogri thing, as Legend's talking about, and the Nogri are back in thanks to Rebels, which I haven't watched yet, but I need to.
I know I haven't either. That's actually something that's like, and actually maybe I'll throw that out there. This is as a side. This is a localized geeky thing. Maybe that's one of those things I need to do as a shout out to my geek friends who want to like have a virtual hangout. Maybe we should virtually watch Rebels together and kind of catch up on things, Clone Wars and Rebels. But anyhow,
that's a great idea.
I've heard very good things about that show.
Well, both of them, both Rebels and Clone, I've heard do really good things for the canon, and are important if you like what's going on in the Marvel universe, or I mean Disney universe today for Star Wars, because they are providing what's a lot of the feed into Mandalorian and all the new series that Disney is actually doing.
So apparently Bo-Katan makes an appearance.
Well, this is one where Legend and Miko will both be like, because I know they've watched them all and love them. Well, so I want to get back though to a little bit of like this fracture, right? Because we were talking about how retconning, good, bad, or ugly. That yes, there are probably some things that I am sure not everything that came out of that 20 years of writing and stuff from the original series before the prequels was gold. That there were things that were lesser, some that were good, but I do know there were a lot of people that had a lot of storylines that came out that were wonderful. Regardless of all that, I don't think brand fatigue in the sake of just you can have too much of one story, one universe by itself makes people say no. I think it goes back to if you have poorly formed stories, experiences, games, movies, whatever it is in a brand, it's not that you're tired of the brand. You're tired or don't want bad actual execution, right? You don't want shitty movies. You don't want shitty games. You want good stuff. And so that's where I think there's really the discussion about what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. So talking more about the state of where things are today, right? You were saying that there's this potential rift between the people in there, and we were talking about how arguably in the more recent cinematic universe that has happened, there's been this press that was, I would argue, minimizing a lot of what it seemed traditional Star Wars fans really enjoyed and loved about the original series and the characters. And that it seems, from what I've read and seen myself, and looking at them, 8, 9, specifically more 8 than anything for me, the idea that they were trying to refocus what they were presenting as the important aspects of the Star Wars universe. I always bitch personally about the idea that anyone can be a Force user anywhere and bloodlines don't matter. Where for me, I thought that was actually something I appreciated, that bloodlines could influence how much sensitivity you and power you have in the Force.
It wasn't. Right? It was by no means a requirement, but the fact of the matter is that in some cases, bloodline matters.
Yeah, and that's where you get into the whole idea that
it was. I agree. I think bloodlines can make. I think it's restrictive in some sense for storytelling, and it often removes some of the fascinating wonder of a world if it is entirely based on genetics, because then it's just the same as like being born as a prince or something. It's like, all right, so you're born to destiny, right? Great. I think stories can have a lot more merit when random farm boy, random female peasant from the peasantry can stand up and
but what you're
take
saying,
over
Ken,
or whatever. That stuff's fun, right?
But what you're saying, Ken, is your only measure using that is that being a Force user is the only thing of value in the story then. Because my argument in the Star Wars universe that makes it so beautiful is that even though you have your Jedi and Sith, your royalty or whatever you might claim it as, you still have your scoundrels and others, your Robin Hoods, your other really neat characters that have nothing to do with the Force that are equally, if not more interesting in the story I think actually defeats the need to make the Force a universal thing anyone would be a part of. Because I know a ton of people who are like, Solo's my man, and having the Force was nothing to do with him, right? That Chewbacca had nothing to do with the Force and was way more entertaining than some of the Force using and powers presented. And I liked that it was this finite class. It's the same thing I say in the games, where when you had the MMOs and such, and Jedi use and Force use became everyone can do it, I thought that actually destroyed the game. It made it less interesting. Because then it's like, everybody's a Jedi, you're a Jedi, you're a Jedi, woohoo! And it just makes it less special and interesting. But, so that's why for me, 8 was like, ugh.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite book series is Codex Alera by Jim Butcher. And the main slight spoiler alert, I guess. The main character in this series is a kid called Tavi, and for the first it's about 8 books or something. In the first 4 books, he is just a guy. He's weird because everybody else has powers except for him. And he ends up throughout his teenage years and I guess his early 20s, he starts developing all these leadership skills, and he actually becomes quite a genius because he has to start using other, everybody else can use their strength powers from the magic of earth elements or whatever to lift things, where he has to make pulley systems and stuff. So he learns all about catapults and trebuchets, and he makes all this cool technology that nobody else even thought was possible, even bothered trying, because why would they? They have strength, right? And I thought that was a really interesting way of doing it, because eventually he does get his powers unlocked, and of course he's more powerful than most people. He has some genetic bloodline type thing, standard in fantasy, right? But because the first half of the books he didn't have it, it showed the power of both sides, and I really appreciate that from Jim Butcher. I thought that was a really novel way of showing that sort of bloodline idea.
No, I love the idea where it also forces the way others in the universe must interact. So for me, anyhow, it goes back to what were they trying to change or emphasize? Because I definitely had the feeling that in some of the newer movies, primarily in 8, there was a huge shift in a focus of what was presented for the things I liked. And it sounds like, back to the rumors and kind of who was involved or who was responsible for what, that, as Todd said, the names between Kennedy and, was it Pablo
Hidalgo, yeah,
were often brought up as primary entities in decision making around what the direction was being in 8, and even into 9, because I still personally feel like 9 was a desperate attempt to try to recapture, because they found, after, like Todd said, the difference in sales, the reactions and stuff, they were like, well, financially, what do we do to save this IP that we've invested so much in? Yeah. Oh, maybe the thing was people that were the old nerds who really liked Star Wars are our target audience, and maybe we shouldn't have so willfully turned our backs on them and actively said we're going to thumb our nose at them. Maybe we should have taken their feelings into account, and thus they came up with 9 as like a, how do we try to make everybody happy?
I wanna bring up this paragraph from the Mendelsohn article in Forbes.
Okay.
After listening to the commentary tracks for Force Awakens: The Last Jedi, I'm disinclined to blame J.J. Abrams for whatever went wrong with Rise of Skywalker. Abrams and Rian Johnson were both seemingly caught flat-footed in terms of what bloggers and social media savvy fans, as opposed to general audiences, would obsess about. Abrams barely mentions Rey's parentage, never brings up Snoke's origins, and certainly doesn't discuss Kylo Ren becoming a damaged sex symbol. Moreover, Johnson pontificates about creating a "why is Luke on the island" backstory that didn't imply that Luke just gave up, and implies that any Reylo romance ended when Rey literally closes the door on Kylo. Nor did they anticipate modern fandom that didn't just ship or speculate for fun, but demanded fidelity to the pre-release headcanon. Disney then mistook online discourse for general consensus. Okay, I have to go back and I have to read one more part of this because it's really, really important. Because Mendelsohn does not even get... He and I watched different movies.
Okay.
Let me see. Oh, yeah. Had Disney and or... here it is. The Luke sequence, intentional or not, acts as a request answered to many of the worst and most toxic would-be Star Wars fans.
This is in response to The Mandalorian's last episode.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the Luke sequence. Yeah, sorry. The end of Mandalorian season
2. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So the ones who chased Kelly Marie Tran and Daisy Ridley off social media and swore that The Last Jedi ruined Star Wars precisely because it didn't feature Luke Skywalker hacking and slashing through his way through First Order troops like a Jedi Academy or Super Star Wars video game character. Yeah. And yes, many of the folks who spent the last 40 years swearing that Boba Fett was cool, despite no in-movie evidence, were the same folks who couldn't believe that Daisy Ridley's Rey could be a Jedi with minimal training. Were outraged that Ahsoka could best Darth Maul in lightsaber combat, and swore that a 9-minute character-specific subplot concerning John Boyega and Kelly Marie Tran ruined the 150-minute Last Jedi. Okay, Mendelsohn and I watched different movies. Because Rey didn't just become a Jedi with minimal training. She bested the presumptive Sith Lord and the most powerful Jedi ever, both in single combat, within 2 weeks of each other, with no training. Not with a little training, not with a lesson, not with anything, with no training.
I was going to say, the one point I always make to that conversation is, in the first movie of them, I could accept her success against Kylo because twofold, he was not trying to best her, and was trying to win her over into the thing. So he wasn't actually trying to kill her, and thus had his own like barrier to what he was trying to accomplish. And so the second, essentially, that he wasn't really committed to win. He was trying to continue the fight to say, you need to come to my side. I see the potential. So I gave it that one. And the other side across all of it, which I gave some deference to Rey, why I could have enjoyed her, at least through 7, into the next I could have enjoyed in that sense, was the idea that she was the first entity we had seen who wasn't trying to manipulate the Force to do her will, but was instead completely in the will of the Force, that the Force was guiding her into it. And it talked about that with the piloting of the Millennium Falcon and with her actively saying, I don't know why I know these things, it just comes to me. It felt to me like she was the first entity where the Force said to bring balance, I'm sorry, this is no longer your will, this is my will of the Force. You will have these things. That she kind of just gave into what the Force directed.
Great.
That was my way of, I could have accepted who was presented in 7 through that. But they shat it later. Well, my hope was that they were going to show more of it in 8, but that's where they lost the opportunity. I could have accepted some of those gaps and holes in 7 if they had done that in 8, right? But they never gave me that. That's me headcanon. Headcanon.
One other thing. She's also a more powerful Force user than Obi-Wan Kenobi because on no training, she can use a Jedi mind trick.
That also, again, yes, she was the, as people like to say, she was Ray Jesus, right? She
was a flaming Mary Sue.
Yeah,
as she was written in episodes 8 and 9, a flaming Mary Sue. Now, it is absolutely possible to construct that character and give that character development so that she's not a flaming Mary Sue and make it work within the rules of the universe. Ready? Raise a virgin in the Force. Done.
Yeah.
That's it. Right? Anakin Skywalker was a virgin in the Force. Very powerful Force user. Probably used the Force in the pod race on Tatooine in episode 1.
Absolutely.
That's what tipped off. Maybe the pod race was after they tested his blood. I have to think about that for a second. Yeah, that was probably after they tested his blood.
Yeah, I forgot what got the first piece of it.
He was very powerful in the Force. Probably why he won that pod race. Probably.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's a thing in Star Wars lore where in the Old Republic days when there used to be, hundreds and thousands of Sith and hundreds and thousands of Jedi, they weren't all like Luke level. They weren't all just super Jedi. They were all much lesser, right?
Yes.
Lots of degrees.
It's like all the Force power was spread amongst them, right?
Yes.
So that means the inverse must also be true, that when the old master has effectively retired and forsaken the Force in some respects, that there are currently no Jedi in the universe. Meaning that the next person who comes in gets it all, right? Effectively.
Well,
that's how I saw it.
Can be a foci for the Force.
To your point, that was the key premise behind Darth Bane reducing the Sith Order to 2. Was that because there were thousands of Sith, or tens of thousands of Sith, and they could never beat the Jedi Order, that his lesson that he learned, that Darth Bane learned from that, was that the dark side of the Force was diluted amongst all these dark side Force practitioners. Mm-hmm. So if you reduce the number of Sith down to 2, then the dark side is going to be more powerful in them.
Consolidating of power. No, I love that idea.
We don't know if that is actually true. Like, it took 1,000 years after the rule of 2 was initiated for the Sith to actually, take control of the galaxy.
Yeah, essentially for Palpatine to get the full
the Jedi Order. Right, it's Palpatine. It's Order 66. Yeah. Right?
Okay.
But that's 1,000 years. Now, in a galactic history that spans over 30,000 years, maybe 1,000 years isn't that much. That's up for debate. But yeah, your point is very well made. But again, right, if Rey's a virgin in the Force, I buy most of what happens relative to her Force powers.
Well, but the challenge, like we said, is that the IP, the movie that came off from what seemed like this new direction, this change or focus, was 8. 8 really had it like, it felt to me like it was fully under whatever this new idea of what Star Wars should be is what led to what we got with 8. And while I openly say there were some beautiful cinematic moments within 8 that looked really pretty and gave some really neat ideas of what things could do. I felt like it didn't have the care necessary to really draw a coherent story across a 3-movie arc. And it's been argued that each one of the postquels or whatever, the last 3 movies, were very separately made, right? That they had very different ideas going in and out of each one of them.
It's clear that the ideas behind the character development and storytelling, right? And by the way, the non-consensual puppy love on Space Vegas is just there to say that capitalism is bad.
It was a completely unnecessary. I forget how many minutes of the movie that it was just like, you cut out all of that.
Yeah, according to Mendelsohn 9, it felt like 3 days. Now it's worth it.
But we got space horses, and we got space horses and cavalry out of it. I got you. So anyhow, as this portrays to like now, because we're going to get up here on the break here shortly, that, as Todd said, went into the potential reaction, and analysis would suggest that the majority of traditional or overall Star Wars fandom reacted poorly to 8. There were a lot of people who liked it, but sales, basically ticket sales, and the subsequent ticket sales and actual purchasing of merchandise, toys and things around the Star Wars IP, was demonstrably lower after 8 hit, and thus talking about whether that did or did not impact what the ticket sales of Solo was. So 2 movies in a row that basically were heavily impacted by what came out of 8.
Correct.
And arguably it did, and that was if we believe that people do vote with their dollar in some form, support the things they love versus not what they don't. That was kind of stating that the majority of people who traditionally paid for Star Wars things were no longer as interested based on Episode 8.
Yeah. I mean,
right? That's what it seemed like.
To be slightly hyperbolic and rabble-rousy about this, no one bought a Rose Tico toy. No one.
Right. Okay.
Right. Even when you could buy them for $1, no one bought them. Right.
So
if that's not an indictment of the character, I don't know what is.
I feel like the worst part about Rose Tico is that her sister was more compelling to me. And she had almost no actual screen time.
Bombers that were made out of paper.
Right.
I literally can't remember who this character is. Could you remind me? I've seen the films.
She's the love interest for Finn, or pseudo supposed love interest for Finn.
The stalker for Finn.
Yeah, the stalker for Finn,
who assaults him and then makes him go with her to Space Vegas. So that they can get on board, the ship where the MacGuffin is.
So regardless of that, but the interesting thing is that was like through the monetary reaction to Episode 8, you could see that in general people were perhaps not as enthusiastic. Arguably, as we get ready to take a break here, think about this over the break and we'll come back and discuss further. We've seen the exact opposite with The Mandalorian, that compared to everything released prior in this new era of Disney, The Mandalorian, from what we've seen demonstrably, like we said at the beginning of the show, most pirated, most downloaded, broke Disney Plus servers, is so popular that not only are all these new people now enthusiastic about Star Wars, it seems as though all of the old fans are also enthusiastic about Star Wars. That you have a massive push in today's market for wanting to consume the Star Wars IP again. And arguably all based on 2 seasons of one show that have made this shift. Because we've talked about Clone Wars, Rebels are good IP, but they didn't make that massive change in viewership and love. The Mandalorian has, like, no question blown it up.
I think it's hard to argue against. I agree.
All right, so think about that, and we'll talk about what that means for this potential civil war that is happening in Disney, this thing that people are watching from the outside and a lot of rumors are going around. As we discuss coming out of the break, what that means for Disney and what's going to go forward with it, as well as we will cover an email from our friend Ionis as he gave me some of his wrap-up or look forward to 2021 that we'll get in his email. So we appreciate that. And we would love for any of you to also give us that wrap-up. Like, what are you looking forward to 2021 based off our last show? We'd love to hear it from you. And as always, your thoughts on what we're talking about now and what's going on in general. If you'd like to hear more about what we have to say, feel free to send us an email at VtWShowX@gmail.com. With that, we're going to take a break. We'll be back. I'm going to throw out a non-likely to get us in trouble song from OC Remix. That is a Star Control 2 song, Light Years Away, from the remixer Mark Vera. So we're going to play that during the break. It's just over 4 minutes, and then we'll be back to continue our discussion on the Star Wars potential civil war after this break. So everyone, get up, refresh your drinks, empty your thimbles, whatever's necessary. We'll be back right after this. As everything starts to like hiccup right as I do that.
All right, Jeremy.
listening to ShowX on VtWProductions.com.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the conversation. All right, so we were just talking before the break about how, obviously, Mandalorian's done something right because sales are out the roof. Every, I think, official license or even unlicensed Grogu, so officially before that, Baby Yoda merchandise created in any form went bonkers. Even when I was selling the service of 3D printed Baby Yoda things, they were super popular as I gifted over the holiday season last year and stuff. People lost their mind when I showed them or gave them variations of Baby Yoda. And so it resonated somewhere, right? It was insane. And I think Disney could showcase how many people even subscribe to their service strictly for The Mandalorian.
I don't know about you, but I subscribed for Tron and the Black Hole.
Admittedly, Black Hole, because dude, I have the Black Hole from my family. I rescued from collection of the family on 45 audiobook of the Black Hole on record vinyl.
Wow.
On 45 with a flip book and it's audio, spoken over on vinyl. Flipping Black Hole.
Can I just point out how weird it is, by the way? If you look back, if you think of 15 years ago, 10 years ago, what we would have thought if somebody said, "So how do you feel about the Star Wars, films? A new trilogy comes out and it's got all your favorite characters and it's got so much budget behind it and it's terrible." But then a random TV show specifically about the Mandalorians, there's kind of that niche part of lore that's not really thoroughly explained. And it's owned by Disney, and there's a Baby Yoda, and it sounds like it's going to be really cringy. And it's like they're pandering to the audience with a Baby Yoda or whatever. And it's extremely successful. It's owned by Disney. You can only watch it on Disney Plus, which is a monthly subscription service just to Disney stuff. How weird is the world? Is that timeline that we're in? That's the norm now.
Yeah,
we're in the future.
I would have looked at you cross-eyed if you had told me that.
Yeah,
2000. If in 2001 you had told me that.
It
right
been...
after I walk out of the theater of episode 3 and there's Ken from the future is like, hey, guess what? In 20 years from now, you're going to be really, really pissed off at an episode of this very saga, and then a show is going to come out that's pretty damn good in terms of storytelling and character development, and there's going to be 8 minutes at the end of the second season that flips your opinion on Star Wars entirely. And you're going to watch it all on a subscription service that's only Disney properties.
Right? Well, so here's the funny thing. Okay, we talked about that to the degree. I actually want to focus, because we could have a whole conversation about what maybe makes Mandalorian the series so good. I want to focus on the last 3 episodes, because I've said it multiple times. To me, the last 3 episodes of The Mandalorian are the best thing I have seen in the Star Wars universe visualized since the original films, in my opinion. It's just like they did something about the build up to and execution of the last 3 episodes of Mandalorian that I'm like, holy cow, thank you. Like, there were so many opportunities where I was like, thank you. And it culminated, like you said, in those last 8 minutes or so of the season finale that was just nerd boner the entire time.
I just have to, because I don't think a lot of people saw it, but one, I just have to say that Katie Sackhoff is a badass.
Yes.
She is the badass character in 3 science fiction properties now.
Right? Look at her.
I mean,
what else is she big in?
Battlestar Galactica was
in Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, right. Okay, I think I know who you're talking about. Okay.
In the Riddick movie, she was the badass. I don't know, a merc character.
Yeah.
Like, so there's a team of mercs, and they're like one team of mercs shows up, and then a second team of mercs shows up, and they're all trying to kill Riddick, right? And she's part of one of the groups of mercs, and yeah, she's just a badass. She showed up and did badass things.
I am so thankful for her as an actress and her general genuine geekdom over it. The shot she had of her in the armor, Like,
yes,
was it with her father visiting set or something? That was just like the
that,
ultimate. Yeah. The grin on her face is so pure, of like, look what I'm doing. I was like,
pure joy. Anyway, so there's a scene towards the end of the last episode in season 2 of Mandalorian where she sees the Mandalorian dragging Moff Gideon onto the bridge, and he's holding onto the Darksaber, and she just gives one of these Starbuck, like, I don't understand what I'm seeing looks, but I know I'm mad.
Yeah. Like,
And it's awesome. It's just like, oh, that's a Starbuck look. We've seen that look before.
So one of the things that I was told is a good thing about the Mandalorian is it's not all about Jedi, and there's no Jedi in it, there's no space magic. There's almost
no Jedi, yeah.
But now there's almost no Jedi. Then is that right?
Well, so
there are 2.
Yeah, officially, I would say there's 1 Jedi in the Mandalorian because
Ahsoka's not a Jedi.
Ahsoka's not a Jedi, right? She was a very strong Force user that ended up through circumstances, and I don't know the full story because I haven't watched Rebels and Clone Wars, going out on her own path to go into and have to save the universe in her own way and chase down things, but she was never able to complete the training, right? So she's not an official Jedi, and she sees herself now as separate from the Jedi Order. Like, she believes in the Jedi way. Could be, you could consider it, but she's not. She's just like she's a very strong Force user that has a very specific task she needs to accomplish. If I understand that right.
I mean, I don't know Ahsoka's story beyond what I've
looking
seen
at you, Legend and Mika. I know you know it.
Yeah. But she is a very powerful Force user. She was the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker. Something happened in which she left, and I don't know what that is, but she's still a powerful Force user. She still has lightsabers, and she still knows how to use all of it.
So cool. I would personally dub her a Grey Jedi then, because I believe anybody who's not officially a Jedi or officially a Sith is a Grey Jedi, right? They just don't follow. You may still have Jedi powers, but you don't follow the
I think you could. I think it
order,
works. Right? Yeah, I think it fits. So, but that's the thing, right? So you're right. The Mandalorian is not all about laser swords and Jedi, which is the traditional what is big about Star Wars. But we've actually seen that, I would argue, in some of the best, most recent IP, it's not about Jedi. Rogue One of the newer movies I think is phenomenal. Is really good almost nothing about Jedi, right? It's got Force attunement and people who are practicing like the religion of the Force, almost in a Buddhist way. And I think it's done masterfully. I love the story beyond the Jedi, right? That's the thing about the Star Wars universe. The universe is so potentially wonderfully complex. And The Mandalorian does spend a lot of time with the not Jedi characters in the universe that we know to be Star Wars. And I would argue the whole thing condensed to a degree, something that makes the success of Mandalorian for me is that from the first episode all the way through the last episode of second season, it played more to the nostalgia factor than I think people may articulate. It took place in all the locations we already know. It involved a character that was new but was similar to a character we already knew in that Boba Fett versus the Mando, right? That we understood Mandalorians were a thing, and they were expanding upon known ideas, but they spent a lot of time on Tatooine, right? They spent a lot of time around areas we were familiar with, which I think was so smart to do, in that it's like, let us tell a new story with new characters where we don't have to treat you like idiots and have to explain every little thing we introduce, because we're doing it in an environment, in a world that is somewhat known. We can actually take that huge leap that says the majority of fans know enough about this, we don't have to spend too much time explaining it. But we can also tell it in a way that people who aren't massive geeks and fans are still enjoying it for the ride that it is. I think they did such a good job treading that line of introducing new people to stuff while being accurate and on point with the canon and lore, such that old fans could just ride along like, flip, yeah, this is my thing.
I think they did a really good job, and this is directly to Favreau and Filoni, I think, where they did a really good job internally with the build. Right?
And what do you mean by that, by the build?
Well, so we get introduced to the Mando, and if he finds Grogu, and then they're stuck on a planet, and he's got to go get these eggs, but he's got to go get these eggs from this giant monster thing, and then we find out that Grogu's a Force user. Like the presentation and the pacing and everything they did about how they were leading you into what's happening. We know that there are Mandalorians on. There are groups of Mandalorians in different places, and they're usually bounty hunters, and there's this whole bounty hunter code thing, right? And so the bounty hunters sometimes get paid in credits, but other times they get paid in Beskar, and you can take the Beskar to a Mandalorian armorer who takes Beskar and turns it into pieces of Beskar armor, and there's this whole thing around that. But it's not what you think it is, because they're like the religious fanatics of I do love people. How they explain more of the Mando culture once they introduce Bo-Katan and the others, and the brilliance of the writing in that, because that's in that last portion of the second season. The whole first season, you're like, Mando, this is the way, right? You're taught this whole mantra of Mandalorians, this is the way, this is the religion, this is what they do. And then in the second season, you're given this nuance of like, oh, you're part of that sect. You're like the religious nut jobs. Yeah, you're one of those. Like, she looks at him the way you would look at a Jehovah's Witness. Yes. That it's like, you are those fringe Mandos that are nutty. Yeah. That's nice. That's not all Mandos, right? That's not what we do. And it's great how, for him, it's a surprise, right? Like, what? But this is the way. And they're like, yeah. But it's so great, right? Because for you. Yeah. And as Mika's saying, it's great because she was confused at first when this happened, when she's like, but the Mandos were always taking off their helmets. And it's like, but now they did such a good job. And that's something, because I think it's important now to talk about that difference and where that split lies. Because we talked about how we have the Kennedy and the, I keep messing up his name, the Pablo one. But then we have this other side, like you said, is the other two are the, please, Todd, as it just Favreau, Filoni, thank you. Favreau, Filoni, and Lucas. That in this conversation, it kind of feels like, or it's been discussed, that that's the divide, right? You have those two sides happening. And part of where the challenge of this conversation continues is that, and I don't know if this is more rumor or true, but I've seen a lot of those insiders who have commented that in what Mando has done for us, and where Favreau and Filoni seem to have been able to capture a somehow magical formula of both being able to talk to original first, 3 movies level fans to everything in between up through new, fresh booty, never been introduced to Star Wars kind of fans, and create something that speaks to everyone. That doesn't follow the line, right? Yeah, so I think the bar isn't that high. and I guess I'm speaking personally. Well, no, right? If the character development in the story makes sense inside the rules of the universe, right? For example, Yoda says in, I think it's episode 1, there are always 2 Sith, a master and apprentice, right? Okay. Up until the end of episode 6, we knew who they were, right? It was, you could say Plagueis and Sidious, but Plagueis is not we don't really get that, yeah. We don't get any of that, but it's Plagueis and, Sidious and Maul, then it's Sidious and Tyrannus, and then it's Sidious and Vader. Man, Sidious just goes through so many, but yes. Well, the apprentices are disposable. Fair. Well, and you can't get too powerful because then they take over the master, right? That's the natural progression. Right? Sure. So we go into episode 7, and there aren't any. Right? There are no Sith. There's a guy with a red lightsaber, but nobody has the title. Nobody has the title of Darth. Nobody's really, not really using dark side force powers or using force powers to hurt people. I mean, kind of like Ben Solo. I refuse to call him Kylo Ren. That would be giving him too much legitimacy as an almost Sith apprentice. So he's Ben Solo. He kind of uses the Force to hurt people, kinda. And we go through all of episode 8, and there are no Sith Lords, but there are always supposed to be 2. Not only are there always supposed to be two Sith, the Force is always supposed to trend towards balance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we've been introduced to this superlatively powerful, apparently light side Force user in Rey, and there are no Sith. There is no dark side Force user. Like Snoke talks about it in the throne room in 8, but I'm sorry, I didn't buy anybody as the bad guys.
Well, they didn't allow Snoke to actually be the bad guy.
Well, right. I didn't buy Snoke as a Sith Lord, and I didn't buy Ben Solo as the Sith Apprentice.
Yeah, the problem was they were going through to something that almost could have been good if they had truly embraced Gray as being the balance. But they never even went to that. Like, they never actually got to that.
Okay, if you're going to do that, you spend you fold episode 8 and 9, and you do Mortis.
I don't know.
I would love to have seen. I know I wouldn't fit with the timeline, but I would have loved to have seen some content about Raven. I remember years ago I read.
Revan.
Yeah, I remember I read through like the entire wiki on that guy. He was fascinating.
Fascinating character.
Yeah, moving back and forth like I'm a pure Jedi. Nope, I'm pure Sith. Nope, I'm pure Jedi. I loved it.
But again, there were a lot of opportunities they could have had to do something more interesting that they didn't. I agree. And so I agree 8 was left with this whole level of there's no real good, bad, or ugly in the universe today, and therefore it feels like what's the point in a lot of ways. But translate that now to like Mandalorian and what they're doing there.
Sorry, Wayne, I want to address something that Legend says in the chat. My argument against saying sequel bad because there's no Sith, then you can't have good Star Wars without Jedi either. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you're telling the main saga, which is the extended story of the Chosen One prophecy, right? Then bringing balance to the Force is the whole point, right? It is because Anakin Skywalker refused to or fulfilled his role as the Chosen One to bring balance in the Force that's why we're here.
It's a discussion on the difference between the mean and the variability, right? I mean, you can absolutely have Jesus level Sith that can, do anything, perform miracles, so long as you have the opposing version on the Jedi side. That's absolutely fine. You could also have 10 million of each. That's absolutely fine. Or you could also have none. That's also fine, so long as there's none on the other side as well. And if there is difference in variance or difference in away from the mean, that's okay, because as long as it tends towards the balance, right? That's the idea. So if a new Jedi does come about in a universe with nothing, then there must be a Sith soon that's going to pop up.
Well, and that's kind of that thing that always came up when they talked about Anakin's the balance of the Force. They're like, yeah, he was, because there were too many good ones in the universe. So how did you not understand balance means dark at that point? Yeah,
it was so obvious.
Absolutely was, right? Yeah, it was like, duh. But when you're left at 8, if it is balanced, you have no story.
Right, and I guess like I'm not suggesting that that 8 is bad solely because there are no Sith, but that's part of it.
I felt that it just left us without, at the end of 8, you're like, so what's the point of a next movie? Because you had no great evil, you had no great good. It's not like where in Empire you were left with oh, things are bad. And we are just a little bit of hope of maybe we could do something good in the future. But right now, things are bad. We lost. We're running for our lives. After 8, you're left with like, I mean,
There's no way the bad guys can win. There's no way the First Order can win.
And so you're left with,
well, that's why they
tell
try to make it so bad at the start, right? They're like, oh, he's got like the big fleet, but times like 100 or something. Like he's made.
Well, again, it's why 9 had to work so hard to make a compelling. What is the issue?
Right, and so episode 9, I know I've made this comparison before, but you know, after Prometheus, when people who are fans of the Alien series were like, wait a minute, you made an Alien movie and there were no xenomorphs. And Ridley Scott was like, all right, fine, F you, I'll show you xenomorphs. Right? I honestly think that when the discussion for what story they were going to tell for episode 9 happened and everybody was talking about, you have created a world with no Sith Lords in it. They're like, all right, F you, we'll give you a Sith Lord.
Oh, I absolutely think it was the apologetic tour kind of thing.
Yeah.
So anyhow, back to Mandalorian. So we saw where there's a huge response. And I would argue in a way that because they actually embraced the original fandom versus trying to alienate them and tell some wholly new outlook on the universe. I think that's kind of the big argument of where this rift potentially exists, is that you had factions who looked like they are trying to present some reference to what they believe is the important things in today's society and their audience or whatever. And then another group who are like, we are ourselves, as I would argue, the embodiment of our fans, that Filoni and I keep messing it up, right? And Favreau
Favreau and Lucas
are not only fans of the thing they're working on, like they are their own target audience, that they said we can. It's like the old thing where I thought I saw a quote that was from someone saying in the newer, like with episode 8 thing, basically trying to apologize for it, saying the director or something, you can't get a new audience while maintaining all these old tropes and characters and things like that. There was something like that. And the meme, right, reducing complex discussions to a singular subject matter or subject line, saying the Favreau and Filoni saying, you can't do that, here, hold my beer. The idea that they're like, not only can you, we're going to show how you do it as experts, right? We're going to do it to an extreme. Because I believe they absolutely succeeded. They captured everybody in what they presented. Like, everybody's happy, essentially. And this all goes back to this response, right, that Pablo did for when somebody who was whatever level of fan showed their joy through their response to the live stream of what that finale did, and those 8 minutes where they did bring back Luke and they presented in such a wonderful, I mean, again, sitting live with friends watching it, seeing their reactions, my reaction, the joy, the excitement, the like, right?
The mistress of giggles can attest to this.
It must be such a, sorry, go on.
No, you can make your point first, Ken, if you want.
I was going to say it must have been such a risk for them because they must have been like, this CGI is costing a lot of money. Should we go ahead with this?
Well, they spent TV dollars on it because admittedly the CGI doesn't look nearly as good as the movies did, but it gets the point across, and it was great. Yeah, it was more than good enough for a show. Enough. Right.
But we were talking about build before, and that's kind of where I wanted to tie that particular point off, right? You know, you're on this scene, and it's like, oh my God, how are the good guys going to get out of this horrible situation? Like, they're trapped. Like, they got to get out of it somehow, or there's no show.
Such good progression. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, lone X-Wing. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, we don't have to go into details, but
I went through this whole process of elimination. It's like, okay, I mean, it could be somebody from the Republic, but that's not going to work because there's only one of them, and that's an entire squad of Dark Troopers. So it's not just some schmuck from the New Republic. So that doesn't work. Okay, it's Ahsoka. Like, we know Ahsoka exists in the universe. We know that she's in contact with the Mandalorian, and we know that she's like, you know, she's talked to, interacted.
It could have worked. It could have worked.
With Grogu, like maybe she changed her mind, about taking Grogu and doing stuff with him. So like I was like, okay, it's probably Ahsoka. Wait, Ahsoka was never in the Rebel Alliance and therefore wouldn't have her own X-wing. Well, not that many people who have X-wings. Okay, single figure in a dark cloak. That looks an awful lot like what Luke Skywalker would look like after the Jedi, right? Lightsaber, single lightsaber, boom, 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 boom.
Well, and the level of what is able to perform from a Jedi perspective or Force user's perspective, right?
Right.
You're just like,
so not
a badass,
like kicking ass, right? But you see it all in black and white at first.
Yes, where you don't know for sure. Yeah. And I was on edge of seats for that. Yep.
Yeah. There are lots of colors of lightsabers, right? And like we didn't actually see Mace Windu die. Right?
Oh man, that would have been also
purple. And then you see a green lightsaber. And it's like, oh, okay, there aren't that many people that we know that are still alive that have green lightsabers. Then we see a glove on the hand, and at that point, I was going like, I started saying at the X-wing, there's no way.
Yeah, that was my reaction. Like,
no way.
What? Nah, they wouldn't. Nah,
no way. There's no way. And I must have said there's no way probably 25 times while this is going on, and then I got emotional. Right? And just to be perfectly honest, in the pantheon of Star Wars characters, Luke might crack the top 10.
Gotcha.
Like I'm just not as interested in the good guys in the Star Wars universe as I am the bad guys. I think Palpatine and Vader and Tarkin and Plagueis and Piet and Dala and like everybody that has been propped up as an antagonist, Thrawn, over the years are much more interesting.
Okay.
Than Luke Skywalker is. I still got emotional. Like it was like, oh my gosh, the most powerful Jedi ever was just shown not as a chump, not as a weak and feeble and scared old man, but as the most powerful Jedi ever.
Yep.
Right? Okay. Now set that aside, and they closed off Grogu's. I should say closed off. They hinted very seriously that the Grogu storyline is going to pause.
Yes, pause is how I would say it. I would say pause is the accurate.
Right? But there's a lot that needs discussing, right? The Mandalorian has the Darksaber. The Darksaber, according to the show, is the key to the throne of Mandalore. Bo-Katan wants to retake the throne of Mandalore and now can't because the Mandalorian has it.
I do. I love that little nuance of how that happened.
Moreover, there are 5 people on the bridge of a light Imperial cruiser that they have control of.
Oh gosh, the potential for what's next is massive.
Out in the middle of space.
Right?
Go.
No, the potential for whatever's next huge, let alone the joy we got from what will be a Boba Fett short and stuff like that.
It's awesome. And to the point that you're making, Legend, again, I'm basing this on the idea that as a rule, when it comes to Force user in combat, the more powerful Force user wins. And with the exception of the end of The Empire Strikes Back, right, when you could argue that Luke is less powerful than Darth Vader.
Oh yeah, at that point I agree.
Right? He's more powerful at the end of Return of the Jedi and beats both Sidious and Vader. Right? Admittedly beating Sidious with some help from dear old dad, but you know. So yeah, I say most powerful Jedi ever. Certainly the most powerful Jedi that we've seen.
I say, in general, I think he was the most powerful, but I also look at all the extra stuff that was beyond, again, the books and everything. There's so many good stories out there. Anyhow. But okay, I wanted to tie this back as close as we can to like this rift, right? Because it seems like what we've been hearing from the inside and the insiders in there talking about is that the people who are responsible for it, that the execs out there there's rumors that they're unhappy, that there was a very significant reaction to the introduction of Luke in the season finale of The Mandalorian. That they specifically looked at it as like, what the hell are you doing? This goes against what we were trying to create of this idea that, you know, bloodlines don't matter, that Luke was, there's a rumor or a discussion point that they seem to have been perpetuating this idea that Luke was actually all things bad about the Star Wars universe, that he's a white male who is powerful, that solved all these problems and things like that, and therefore, in order to have better representation and stuff like that, we need to actively minimize the character of Luke Skywalker. There was rumor in an article I read that said in the actual studio or the area where they were working on episode 8 and some of the other stuff, that those people had like a picture of Luke Skywalker up on the wall with a big X out on his face.
I had heard similar.
Rumors was basically saying they were actively trying to take away and destroy essentially the heroic nature and memory of Luke Skywalker, to present this new idea that we have entirely new characters that you should care about because we tell you this is the future of what it should be.
I agree with them that they should certainly be looking for new characters, because Star Wars is moving on. Some of the cast have been passing on, sadly.
Oh, absolutely.
They can't rely on old faces forever. Sure. I don't think.
But you have to do that.
100%.
But you have to do that by trying to actively destroy the original.
No, and I'm all for diversity. I'm all for trying to encourage the number of women, number of minorities and such. They're the new characters. That's all fine. I'm okay with that. I don't think you need to diminish the old ones for that. I think if you want to have an IP where there isn't a white male savior as the sort of like one of the main dudes, then you need to make a new IP, because Star Wars already has it.
Right. You just introduce those characters and make their own story without having to say we're only good because we've now made the old terrible or we've neutered them in some way, right? And the challenge, right, that goes with this whole conversation as to whether they were actually accomplishing this task. And I've seen this written in multiple places, and I didn't think about it at first until I came back and heard those discussions. I was like, no, crap. They had every opportunity and proved they were full of crap because of how they treated Finn. Because Finn became the ultimate token character in all of the Star Wars universe.
Ooh, that's an interesting perspective.
Well, because people who push on about diversity and stuff and these same people that were trying to make the case that the original movies wasn't diverse, which I, after reading some other discussions, agreed that they're full of garbage. Even though Luke was the main protagonist, Leia was never a simp, was never someone who was not herself a strong character. Lando Calrissian, when introduced, while under the auspice and having to deal with Cloud City and wanting to keep his people safe, was not a poorly written or bad character, right? And was a black character that showed at an equal level to Han Solo in his own right back in the 70s and early 80s, right? That they were already doing it. And yet alone a universe that's fanciful that has aliens everywhere. Finn...
Lando Calrissian was the leader of a
city, right? That...
Yeah, and an independent municipality, right? I mean...
Yes! Well, and so then they bring up Finn. And Finn starts with a potentially interesting story in 7, right? And they're doing their thing where stormtroopers are no longer clones. They're now basically babies that have been brought into a controlled system inside this thing because it works better than the clones. And so, cool, I accept that. And Finn's has this whole conflict of emotion about whether he's willing to kill indiscriminately or rebel, and does it, and that's great. And so they set the stage for him to be all these wonderful things. And then his play back and forth with Rey and such. And then in 8 and 9, he is just forgotten and dropped. Where he's essentially the background character who's now just, in a sense, simping after Rey. His only motivation is, I must chase after Rey and protect her. And there's no actual connection as to the why. He's not in love with her. There's no romance.
Rey the white savior.
Which is such a racial thing anyways. Kinda. Right? But it is, right? It's such a racially problematic thing. And they fall into that trope even though they're trying to be woke in some way. That they took what could have been interesting. Because wouldn't it have been better if Finn became the new Han Solo character or such? Or if Finn had actually become a primary, and I really was hoping for this, like the primary protagonist outside of Rey, where maybe he wasn't the Force user, but he was the drive and the one pushing for change and doing stuff. And Rey was almost the muscle being the Force user behind it. Like there were so many other opportunities to use his character. And while he had a strong start, everything after 8 and 9 was just like, and he became even more token. I was excited when they showed that one scene because whether it would have been good or bad about lineage, I actually like, again, the Bloodline story. I wanted Finn to be Lando's son. I really did. Because when they showed the one little casting where it's in a language we can't read, but it's basically Finn's birth certificate or baby records in the First Order's records, right? And they show like a little black baby kind of thing and then some stuff. I would have been so throttled if basically the First Order had gone out and sought some of the classic rebel leadership and top people and stolen their kids to bring them up in the First Order as being their like controlled things. Wow. Wouldn't that have been interesting? Like we sought him out because Calrissian was so strong. We're going to build up this Finn in our own thing. Wouldn't that have been interesting? But these are all things they just lost. And so their argument that they were trying to be woke doesn't hold water with me.
So the other thing that I was thinking about, and they kind of did it, but not in the way that I was thinking, is I was really kind of hoping that, like, at the end of episode 8, they're making their escape, right? They sent the signal out to everybody, and no one showed up.
Yeah.
Right. And what I wanted to happen is for that rebellious streak in Rey to sort of snap. And instead of in that scene where Kylo's like cutting down people and, you know, slashing through people or whatever to find the holocron or whatever, I wanted that to be like the remaining rebels, like going to find their friends that abandoned them. That's like, oh, you're gonna abandon us, huh? Right? And have it be where Rey's flirting with the dark side is way more profound or way more interesting, maybe is the right word, than what it was.
Yeah. No,
right? And
that would have been.
They're like, we're going to make you join our side.
Oh, 8 would have been way more interesting if Rey had gone dark and Kylo struggled and was going light. Because that would have been the flip-flop that would have still allowed us to balance it, that we would have something to resolve in 9. That would have been way more entertaining. It's also what I hoped, and we don't get, would have happened in the end of Mando. Once Grogu was kidnapped, basically, and Moff Gideon saw that he had a penchant for doing evil deeds, things that were dark related to the stormtroopers, and get joy out of it. And Moff, he made a specific note of like, oh, look at that. Isn't that interesting? I wanted them to not finish the overall discussion of Grogu in Season 2. I wanted it to still be lost, and I wanted the end of Season 2 to have a first inkling of Moff Gideon actively cultivating the dark side in Grogu. Like, I wanted that, like in the same essence of an Empire Strikes Back dark note. I wanted it to be, leave it at the end of the season that Mando, while they're making progress, they maybe got a hit and they're going to try to go get him. But Moff Gideon is still in charge and still like, but look what I can do with you. You are no longer just a DNA source. I can make you a weapon. And that would have
been okay.
Because then Mando, if he tried to get back to him, it would have been a different Grogu. A Grogu who's now been tainted, and that could have been a hell of a story.
No, that would have been a hell of a story, too. You still have to deal with the fact that we don't know that. I mean, how do you teach somebody to be
dark?
To be a dark side force user? Like,
I think it was just he was already showing that he was willing to throw them around, potentially choke. Moff Gideon having been around Vader or understanding of what Sith were like, simply creating scenarios that encourage that reaction from Grogu.
Oh, all right.
Right. It's not that he knows how to train him. He just says he starts feeding him the like scenarios where his reaction to start doing pain and stuff gets emphasized. So that little bit of grin that Grogu essentially got for slamming them around where it was like he's having fun, that he encourages it and just keeps encouraging it like, oh, you're tired now, but don't you feel good about it? Right. I had this nerdgasm for the potential of making a gray Grogu. That it would have been wholly dark for a moment, and the redemption story of Grogu would be Mandalorian's third season task. Get him back, don't die from the first interaction, and then show him things about life that would have made Grogu have to change what was so easy and satisfying in a dark interaction to come back to the light. But that's Wayne's headcanon fandom. I'm doing the bad thing by saying what I hoped would have happened.
Yeah. No, turn him from Mogwai into a gremlin and then back.
Right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that have been a great just storyline?
Totally acceptable. Totally acceptable.
And admittedly, that might be a little bit of my reaction to the whole Baby Yoda is great in all things thing, where I'm like, I think he's kind of dark myself, eating all those baby eggs. But
yeah, yep.
So,
like, we never really. I mean, that's kind of if you want to really point a
it's okay because those were only frog people, and frog people aren't really people.
Yeah,
and so you can't really be mad at Grogu for eating frog people babies that weren't inseminated yet, because that's not really people.
Hashtag tadpole lives matter.
Right? They're only like 3/5 alien because they weren't actually inseminated.
Oh, well,
I like it.
We're not trying to say that non-tadpole lives don't matter. We're just saying that the tadpole lives do matter, and that your little baby Force users shouldn't be eating the unborn children of the person you're supposed to be helping.
I am so like about that, but yes. So, no, Spencer, not all green lives matter. Only the green lives matter of those that look like a Baby Yoda. But
me, not that kind of orc.
Work.
So the challenge we have is we're getting towards the top of the show here, the end of it. I am concerned because I'm hoping, as we talked about kind of at the beginning of the show, that the almighty consumerist dollar speaks in this way and actually does control the will of the execs who make the decisions. Because if you just follow the dollar, there's no question that what Filoni and Favreau have been doing is the right answer in the Star Wars universe.
Well, and it's rumored to have had influence beyond just Lucasfilm, because they're talking about changing the overall theme of Star Wars Land to go away from the sequel trilogy and towards the Mandalorian.
That sounds smart,
right? So instead of it being on Jakku or wherever, it would be on Tatooine or on wherever the smuggler hideout was, which may have been Tatooine too. I don't remember. There's been, again, rumors, unsubstantiated, but there's been talk that the higher ups at Disney are like, well, this sequel trilogy thing didn't really work out, and why don't we convert? It wouldn't take that much to convert. You
just have to tweak the staff initially, right, and make the next ride be more of a Mando themed Razor Crest or something themed ride, and you're good. Let me have I get to put on a helmet that's like a Mando helmet and get on a ride that makes me feel like I'm flying around in a Mando jetpack, and I'll probably have a pretty good time, right?
I would,
So no, you're right. It'll be interesting to see how it does pull through. And I agree actually here with what Mika said, is that's why Filoni and Favreau should just take charge of Star Wars. Like if I were a Disney investor, right? In that sense, having enough stock, my answer would be give them full reign and back the F off, because they will make more stockholder money for me than any of your whatever righteous direction so-called nonsense people have been that were screwing it up, right? They're so much that can go forward with Star Wars.
If I recall correctly, they're in charge of most of it.
Well, it sounds like all the series stuff, right? If not movies,
I think they're involved in Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think they're involved.
I know they're involved with Boba Fett.
Ahsoka. I think they're involved in Andor.
Well, I'm assuming they may be involved in the other animated ones, Andor and stuff like that, the other animated ones. So hopefully it's the case.
So as far as I know, the only one that they're not involved in is the Acolyte.
Okay, which is funny because if there's pre-knowledge from people about what Acolyte could be, wouldn't that be a telling thing if Acolyte just falls on its face? If they try to do all the rumored things of retconning and continue to make it an issue, and if the other half, the Filoni and Favreau side, just says to all of them, and we're going to make good Star Wars, wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah,
and I do have to say, because yes, it's watching the chat. It's funny as ever. Like Sir Spencer said, like, what are your all thoughts on when the Razor Crest got destroyed? And for me, it was kind of like, it had been through some stuff. It might have been time for it to be put out to pasture. And the beautiful thing is, we got more Slave One. And actual Slave One doing something. And I am okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was great. I was, again, this is one of those legend canon things that sort of everybody who's followed the old EU sort of knows. But, Boba Fett got out of the Sarlacc at some point.
Yeah, there had been that canon or understanding at some point prior.
So I was not particularly beholden to the ship per se, but I would take more Slave One, and I was perfectly content with Boba Fett too. So I don't know if you noticed this, but in the scene where Boba Fett's fighting Bo-Katan's second, the Bo-Katan's second is a professional wrestler.
Oh, is she?
She's a professional wrestler named Sasha Banks. She's actually Snoop Dogg's cousin.
Oh shoot! Okay.
All right.
And in that fight, they had her use her jetpack to give
Boba Fett
a tornado DDT. Is like awesome. It's like, wow, wrestling move, really? And then I found out sometime later that was Sasha Banks. So
okay, yeah, I didn't realize that was the case, but I love that action scenes because they did such a good job with Boba Fett and with the other Mandalorians. Thank you. That's so good.
Filoni and Favreau and George Lucas somewhat apologizing to the fan base for, I don't want to say for the sequel movies, because there are plenty of people who liked the sequel movies, but apologizing for the people who said if you didn't like the sequel movies, it was because you were part of the toxic part of the fan base. And it was them presenting the premise that the supposedly toxic part of the fan base were as passionate as anybody and would appreciate good character development and storytelling. And as it turns out, they were right.
Well, it's the thing, right?
I don't know how you can watch some of these montages on YouTube of the reaction of that episode in particular and see men and women of all descriptions and colors like in tears. Right?
It was
just a flood of emotions.
Yeah.
We watched one of our childhood heroes get murdered in front of us, and now he's been resurrected in, some fashion.
Yeah,
and
in a way,
I can tell you from my perspective that is entirely how I felt.
Oh, dude, it was amazing to me. Well, and it leads us to, and Mika and Legend can fill the blank for this, the opening for the potential of new Luke Skywalker's content. Because I forget the name of the actor, the one that played Crud.
Stan.
Yeah. When they did the comparison and the deep fake and all the stuff of how well he looks like a young, Mark Hamill, Sebastian Stan, thank you. I knew Mika and Legend wouldn't let me down. That they could make new Star Wars content now that could be Luke Skywalker and Grogu. And Grogu stuff and I would be so down. Because what they did in those last 3 episodes to me set me on. Oh yeah, that's right. Of course, it's Mika's boy because it's the guy that plays Bucky from Avengers and stuff. But that I am more willing to consume new Star Wars media today than I was a month ago. I was already 100%. On an upward trend with The Mandalorian. I was enjoying it with this constant level of, but damn it, when the next movie comes out, I know I'm going to be disappointed. But I'm having this I like. Now I'm a lot more actually, knowing that there's a little more backing for this and seeing the roadmap of things coming forward, I'm a lot more gimme. I'm ready. I'm moist and willing.
100%. I have to now look at who's acting in, writing for, and directing each of these properties, right? Because I'm not going to watch The Acolyte. Brie Larson's in it and Kathleen Kennedy's behind it. No, thanks. And you can, if you want to do activism and subject us all to it, that's fine. I ain't watching. Now Ahsoka, Rosario Dawson's gonna be Ahsoka Tano and do Ahsoka Tano things. Yeah, with Filoni and Favreau and Lucas behind it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. If they're gonna do a Rogue Squadron movie.
Yes.
No, I know it's not set. I don't believe it's set.
It's a follow-on. It's later, or it's a current general. Dang it, other people know. But yeah, it says Legend says takes place after Rise of the Skywalker. So yeah,
that's what I meant. It's not going to be set when I want it to be set, so it's not going to be the Wedge Antilles movie that he's owed.
Hey, they gave Wedge some screen time in the Squadrons game. I do appreciate that.
Okay, well that's good at least.
No, they did. They did a decent job with Squadrons bringing people in.
Seriously, he's the only pilot to have survived the Battle of Yavin, the Battle of Hoth, and the Battle of Endor as a pilot.
Right? Everyone else is pew. Dead.
And he gets 5 minutes of screen time in 7.5 hours. That's the best. Well, that's not true. They copy and pasted him, gave him a darker page job, and called him Poe Dameron. So,
yeah. Well, okay. It's time for us to end up the show here. What I do want to, on the final note with that, because we're talking about Star Wars IP stuff, that reminds me, good, bad, or ugly, and whether as a PC gamer people are supportive of Epic games or not, the next free Epic game that's coming out, which I think hits in the next 2 days or so, is going to be Battlefront 2 or whatever, the newer Battlefront game, Star Wars.
Oh, that's not bad.
That they're going to put that as.
They had all the horrible, pay to unlock characters crap.
Yeah,
right.
It had that kind of stuff, but it's going to be completely free, at least whatever iteration of it, next on Epic. So right now, Crying Suns is free, coming January 14th to the 21st, Battlefront 2 Celebration Edition, so it might have some limited stuff, who knows, is going to be free on Epic. So I'm throwing that Star Wars, and I want more people, because it was a really pretty game. I want people to be able to play with on it. So
Sure. So I will, just to tie this all off again, most of the stuff, with the exception of the Pablo Hidalgo tweet about Star Wars Theory and the sort of harassment that came as a result of that, most of what we talked about in this episode is not substantiated.
So I got to do a double. Actually, you know what? We may wait. No, Ionis is here. I didn't do Ionis's email. I didn't do Ionis's email. I have it here.
Scandal.
I can finish up the show with Ionis's email. I just checked the chat and it says he's still listening, so I don't want to do him dirty. And so we may go a minute or two over so I can get this in there.
All right.
All right. We good? So this is that look ahead, like we said, to 2021 from Ionis, because we're super appreciative of everyone who writes in the show. We will read your content. This comes in from Ionis saying, this week, I looked into the concept of World of Warcraft speedrunning. It is a somewhat obscure category of speedrun.com where people upload their fastest times at doing old raids, dungeons, or leveling. Normally, when I think about speedrunning, I imagine someone playing one of the venerated old classics, often made by Nintendo, going for the fastest run imaginable in a given category. Warpless, glitchless, all-stars, any percent, things like that. Speedrunning WoW feels weird, as a bunch of classes, most of them really, are instantly disqualified from the competition due to the lack of mobility. Then, some races provide some inherent speed bonus, followed by choosing correct professions and eventually obtaining specific sets of gear that provides maximum speed increase. Then, and only then, you can start actually working on your times. Another oddity revolves around weekly lockout when it comes to raids. You pretty much get one try per week per character to get a good time. No reset button on any of the raid after first kill. Any of you guys ever considered speedrunning games? Which games would you choose if you had to pick one?
Wow. Good question.
That's a good question. It's a field that I've always been interested in, seeing the news about, and I'm kind of fascinated watching the odd video here and there on YouTube. But I don't know if I would actually want to speedrun myself. I can't say it particularly appeals to me. It seems like a lot of work for almost no payoff mentally for me.
I was going to say for World of Warcraft, it would be a massive path optimization problem.
Yeah.
Like it's a huge path optimization problem. As far as games that I would speedrun, Isaac. Like there was a period of time where there was competitive Isaac speedrunning, like Isaac Racing.
Okay.
Where you would start the game at the same time, and then the first person to complete the chest, which is usually the most common way you run that game when you run it. The first person to complete the chest wins. And that had a really... That was how I found out about Isaac in the first place, was because of Isaac speedrunning, or Isaac Racing. And I love the game. But I think it would probably be Isaac for me.
Nice.
Because I thought about trying to do Isaac Racing, but I'm not nearly good enough.
So for me, that's tough because I don't play many games with that optimization in mind. But if I were to choose one, and I don't think I have a specific game, I think anymore it would be something in VR. I'd want something that was active, and there's a game I've seen that I haven't played yet that's a combination like archery game where you're doing the shooting, but in it they also give you mobility through that, where you actually shoot arrows that cause you to move. That's like you shoot it over there and it teleports you up, and as you're moving, you're flying through the momentum of the arrow. You can keep shooting and then keep moving. Something like that, or there's a VR version basically of Mirror's Edge that's a VR parkour game.
Yeah.
Or something like that I haven't played either. But I think something like that might be more my style now, because it's less the optimization of that exact like hack you do in the game. Like for me, watching Half-Life 2 ones where you basically crouch, jump, backwards, run, and it constantly accelerates you because of the bug in the game where there's no limit on the acceleration doing that. Having to actually perform in real life to some level of capability, the VR aspect and immersion piece would, I think, be intriguing to me. And so I don't know the game yet, but something in there might be fun, because then I could actually get out of it with my sweatband on my head or something, like, look what I did. That's almost like a sport that would maybe be enticing to me. That's interesting. All right, continuing.
I had to think about it, and I think my game would be Factorio. I think that's easy to do in terms of learning, because I've already gone through the biggest peak of learning how to do that stuff, I guess. Additionally, do I get it cheap by using my own AI that I'm working on? I mean, I could.
Well, I would assume that would be a type of run if there were classes of runs where you're doing a non-AI assisted run versus a full AI optimization run, or which could be interesting in its own right. In fact, I think you could probably create your own class of that, Ken. A versus AI war in Factorio that you could probably do. And if you really wanted to push it, ShowX would support you going into Amazing Games Done Quick and trying to partner with them to do a subclass of Factorio that is AI driven, that you spend your time explaining what the AI is doing while it's playing to talk about that rotation. Doing it. But I'm saying,
happening, but I would be allying with anybody that's not a research faculty.
Well, no, but
I've already got plans for an optimization conference that we're trying to.
But I'm just saying, wouldn't that be a fun way to get it in the eyes of the general population and raise money for a good cause if we could tie it to what already happens through Amazing Games Done Quick, as we saw at the top of the show with Copy saying that they raised $2.7 million this time for whatever
2.7 million and change,
for whatever thing they're doing, and we've always talked about. I would love to participate. All right, to finish the email so that we don't screw it up, because I know Ionis is like, wait a second. Wait, Ionis is now saying he has a Star Wars show and you weren't there. On a completely different topic, in 2020, I started a little experiment. I bought a bunch of games released in 2010 and began playing through them to see how these decade-old titles fare against the, quote, modern gaming experience. The experience was a bit hit and miss, with some games feeling like absolute slugfests. Example, Fallout New Vegas. It hits the sour spot deep inside my heart that forces me to stop every time. And some fun titles I never played in 2010, like Darksiders, was a charming, almost old-school action game and loved it. I continue the experiment in 2021. I'm planning to play through a bunch of 2011 games. On my radar so far are modern classics like Portal 2, Skyrim, Saints Row III, Deus Ex Human Revolution, Batman Arkham City, among others. Throw on top of that pile some less popular titles, and of course, Duke Nukem Forever. Ooh.
That is a good year for gaming, by the way, 2011.
It's amazing to show that that's like a decade ago, some of those games.
Saints Row the Third was so dope.
Right?
That game was so good.
And Skyrim was amazing, too.
Skyrim I quite enjoyed. Well, he put that list, and I was like, actually, because Portal 2, oh, man, did I have joy in playing Portal 2. Like, especially the old sections.
Games that are comedy games, they're good.
Yeah, no, that was a good year. And honestly, Batman Arkham City, as one of those type of open world superhero games, the Batman series was good.
Yeah, they were not bad. The Arkham series, you bet.
Yeah, I felt dope, like you said, fighting as Batman with the timing sequences and doing all the abilities and so those were good games. You will enjoy that, Ionis. Finishing, says the end goal of this experiment is figuring out, are games actually getting better? Is what we have now objectively more entertaining, sophisticated, and more immersive than games from a decade ago? 2010 results were somewhat obscured by COVID-19 as my gaming routine went through a major disruption for an extended period of time, but this year, I'm going to make at least 4 tweets about my findings and stream at least once. Follow, like, subscribe. Nice. Also going to have OnlyFans for the project as soon as I get unbanned after posting naked GLaDOS pics. Take care all, and let me know any recommendations for 2011 games to add to the list. Kind regards from Ionis.
Oh, man.
If that isn't an email of the times, I don't know what is.
I'm gonna get them feet pics.
Does GLaDOS have any feet?
Well, so with the GLaDOS thing, I was like, what are you doing? Showing all those exposed wires? That is
potato.
Scandalous.
Oh, yeah. Is it potato GLaDOS, or is it originally fully connected GLaDOS? Oh, that's wonderful, Ionis. Thank you for that. So, everybody, we are over time, but we've hopefully had a lively discussion today about things Star Wars related and just kind of an awareness that there are some potential, I don't know, back and forth hiccups and maybe a rift in what's going on in Disney and the creation of Star Wars that hopefully, from us who are fans and are seeing where the potential growth and forward-leaning of Star Wars is, we see more Filoni and Favreau IP and influence than we do Kennedy and Hidalgo going forward, at least from our perspective here on ShowX. And so that's how I see it. But with that, let's let you have the rest of your day back here on this Sunday and getting ready for this next week in this new year of 2021. as we get to go forth and hopefully conquer and everybody be safe and have fun. Let's go ahead and let things go here. Let's see.
Okay.
Take us home.
You have been listening and watching and paying attention to ShowX live on twitch.tv/VtWShowX. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate you guys. Mika, you're just asking. I was just about to say it. Don't worry. Where My Pro's At is coming back this week. We're covering The Bad Seed, which is a novel by William March, his name is. I finished reading it last week myself, and I think Ken and I have rather opposing views on the book. So it's gonna be an interesting show. It'll be this coming Wednesday at 6 p.m. EST, 11 p.m. GMT. And
awesome.
we'll decide on what next week's one is after that. I think it might be Toxfig's Almanac by Sandy Toxfig, which was my choice of book. Relatively unknown author. She herself is quite famous. She took over for Stephen Fry on the TV show QI in the UK, and has done many other amazing things, written several novels. But as a novelist, she's relatively unknown. I think this book has 2 ratings on Goodreads, but it did only come out 2 months ago. But be sure to check that out. Be sure to check out The Bad Seed before you join us in the show. You don't have to, but it will be spoiled, so you may prefer to. And
awesome.
that'll be a lot of fun. 6 p.m. on twitch.tv/ Where My Pro's At. Yeah, it's exactly that. You can also check out all the show links for this show with our Linktree. It is in the chat now. It's linktr.ee/VtWShowX. You can also check out the Where My Pro's At Linktree with linktr.ee/WMPA. I think. I'll double check that. No, it's not that. Don't click on that. It's linktr.ee/Where My Pro's At. Let's try that one. I think that's it. I have 3 that I manage. There we go. That's it. So
careful what links you click.
I've got my own personal one. I've got the ShowX one, and I've got this other show's one. So there you go.
Thank you very much, Ken.
Sure to subscribe to our Goodreads community, our Reddit, all that stuff. For both shows, all that is available within those couple of links there. It's a nice, easy way if you know having to remember everything, and you can find it all in an easy, clickable format. You just need to type in that one link, and then you'll have access to, I think, 10 others. Nice and easy. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. We love having you guys here. Enjoy watching the chat. And thank you both Todd and Wayne for carrying the show, as I have not seen Mandalorian, so I didn't have much to add. But I thoroughly enjoyed listening and voicing my clueless opinions occasionally.
That we are all here for the balance. But thank you, everybody, for checking us out. And with that, we wish you all a great week and a very major good for joining us. Salute. And we are out of here, everybody.
Goodbye.
Have a good one.
See you next zombie.